The air was filled with music and laughter, creating what seemed to be the perfect atmosphere for the happiest day of my life, my wedding day. My name is Shirley, and I stood in my white wedding gown, feeling like a princess, with all eyes on me. I should have been on top of the world, but that joy was short-lived. As I was mingling with my friends, I heard a voice that cut through the happy noise. "Shirley, dear, could you come here for a moment?" It was my mother-in-law, Mrs. Ronald. Her voice was sharp, leaving little room for any refusal. I excused myself from my friends and walked over to her, noticing how stiffly she stood and how tight her smile was. Something wasn't right. "What is it, Mrs. Ronald?" I asked, doing my best to keep my voice polite and respectful. Even though her tone made me uneasy, I didn't want to make things worse. "It's about the way you look at me, Shirley," she said, her voice full of accusations. "I can tell you look at me with contempt. I'm your husband's mother, and I deserve respect, not disdain." Her words caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting this, especially not on my wedding day. "Mrs. Ronald, I think you're mistaken," I replied, feeling confused. "I have nothing but respect for you." "Respect?" "Ha," she scoffed. "I've seen the way you roll your eyes when I speak, the little sighs. Do you think I'm blind? You've been turning my son against me." Her voice grew louder, and I noticed some of the nearby guests were starting to look in our direction. The situation was getting out of hand. Just then, my husband Paul walked over. "Mom, what's going on here?" he asked, concern written all over his face. "Your wife," Mrs. Ronald said, her voice trembling. "She's been disrespectful to me. She's always looking down on me. And today, on your wedding day, she's been worse than ever." Tears welled up in her eyes, making her look vulnerable. Paul turned to me, his face a mix of disbelief and anger. "Shirley, is this true?" he asked, clearly not sure what to believe. "No, it's not true," I said firmly, feeling a rising sense of injustice. I couldn't believe I was defending myself against such false claims on what should have been a day filled with love and happiness. "I've never disrespected her. She's lying." Mrs. Ronald's voice cracked with emotion as she clung to Paul's arm. "I'm your mother, Paul. Would I lie to you?" she sobbed, making it look as if I was the villain. And then, in a moment that felt utterly surreal, Paul's hand came up, and he slapped me across the face. The sharp sound of his hand against my cheek echoed through the now silent room. I stood there, frozen in shock, my hand instinctively rising to touch my stinging cheek. All around us, the guests who had been celebrating moments ago were now staring at us, their faces reflecting the same disbelief I felt. How had things come to this? 5 minutes, I was celebrating what should have been the happiest day of my life, and the next, I was humiliated and hurt in front of everyone. The slap wasn't just physical, it was an emotional blow that left me reeling. Paul had believed his mother's lies, and in that one action, everything I had felt for him, love, trust, excitement for our future, started to crumble. I wanted to scream, to cry, to disappear from this nightmare. But I couldn't move. All I could do was stand there, my cheek burning, surrounded by a crowd of onlookers who had no idea what to say or do. My dream wedding had turned into a nightmare, and I had no idea how to wake up from it. In that moment, as I stood there, everything changed. The fairy tale I had envisioned for myself was gone, replaced by a harsh reality I hadn't anticipated. And as I looked at Paul, the man who was supposed to love and protect me, I realized that the road ahead would be far more difficult than I had ever imagined. I didn't speak to Paul or Mrs. Ronald, but instead, I whispered to the universe that had allowed this horrible moment to happen. Paul tried to apologize, his voice shaky and full of regret. "Surely I didn't mean to," he started, but I cut him off. "No," I said, my voice calm despite the storm raging inside me. "You've shown me exactly who you are." I didn't need to hear anything else. I felt something shift inside me, something strong and unbreakable. I turned to face the crowd, who had all witnessed the slap and the humiliation. "I'm sorry you had to see that," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Please continue enjoying the celebration. I just need a moment to myself." With that, I walked away, my head held high. I could hear the whispers behind me as people started talking, but I didn't care. I refused to be ashamed of something I hadn't done. This wasn't the end for me. In fact, it was the start of something new. A plan began to form in my mind, a plan for justice. This humiliation would not go unanswered. Once I reached the privacy of the bridal suite, I allowed myself to let go. Tears fell freely down my face, but they weren't just tears of pain. They were tears of strength and determination. I wasn't going to let this define me. I wasn't going to be a victim. I was going to fight back. I was going to win. After that horrible incident at the wedding, I knew I had to take action. The first thing I did was hire a private investigator. His name was Mr. Christopher, and he was known for being discreet and effective. I needed his help to gather evidence. I wanted proof of what was really happening in my marriage, and I wanted it done quietly. "Mr. Christopher, I need your help," I said when we first met. "My husband Paul, and his mother, well, they've been less than kind. I think there's more to their behavior than just what people see. I need to know everything." "Understood, Shirley. What are we looking for exactly?" he asked, getting straight to the point. "I need proof of their actions. Anything that shows emotional, financial, or legal abuse. Whatever you can find." "Consider it done," he said, his voice calm and professional. "I'll start with surveillance and background checks. I'll dig into their pasts, their finances, everything." With Mr. Christopher on the case, I started gathering my own evidence too. Every time I spoke with Paul or his mother, I recorded the conversations. I saved every text message, every email. I was building a case, slowly but surely. In the midst of all this, my friend Emma became my biggest support. She was there for me every step of the way. "Emma, I don't know how I'd get through this without you," I told her one evening when everything felt overwhelming. "You don't have to do it alone," she said, squeezing my hand. "I'm here for you always." "What's the plan?" "I'm collecting evidence. Mr. Christopher is helping too. I want to expose them for who they truly are," I said, feeling stronger with her by my side. "Just be careful, Shirley," she warned. "They won't see this coming, and they'll be furious when they find out." "I know," I said, my voice firm. "But I can't let them get away with this." Over the next few weeks, the evidence started piling up. Paul's phone calls became more aggressive and belittling. Financial records showed that Mrs. Ronald had tight control over Paul's money. There were strange transactions in their bank accounts, money being moved around without any clear explanation. One evening, Emma and I sat down to review everything we had found. "Look at these bank statements, Emma," I said, pointing at the screen. "They're moving large sums of money. But where is it going?" "And these emails," Emma added. "They're planning something, but what is it?" "We need to connect the dots," I said, my heart racing. "This is bigger than just emotional abuse. It's a web of lies and manipulation." Emma's eyes widened as she realized what we were onto. "Surely this is huge," she said. "We're uncovering something much bigger than we thought." As the evidence grew, so did my resolve. I knew that I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore, I was exposing the truth, and I wouldn't stop until justice was served. As I dug deeper into the evidence, the situation became clearer. Paul and his mother weren't just difficult people, they were involved in something much worse. They were not only toxic, but also likely doing things that were illegal. "Emma, I think they're embezzling money from Paul's company," I said, showing her the documents I had found. "These papers, they're proof." Emma looked worried. "Surely this is serious. You need to be really careful. They won't be happy when they find out what you know." "I know," I replied, feeling the weight of the situation, "but I can't back down now. I've come too far." The evidence was strong, not just proving their cruel behavior toward me, but also their shady dealings.
It was clear that it was time to act.
I had to come up with a plan to not only protect myself, but also to bring them to justice for what they had done. "Emma, I'm going to expose them," I said, feeling determined. "I need to do this publicly, so they can't hide anymore." "That's risky, Shirley," Emma warned, "but if anyone can do it, it's you." With Emma by my side and all the evidence in hand, I felt stronger than ever. This wasn't just about standing up for myself anymore. It was about revealing the truth and seeking justice. I needed the world to know who Paul and his mother really were. The next step was clear. I had to reveal everything. I decided to organize an event. On the surface, it would seem like I was making a big announcement, so I invited friends, family, and even a few media contacts. The event was set up at a beautiful venue, and the atmosphere was buzzing with excitement as people wondered what I was going to say. When everyone had arrived, I stood in front of the room, my voice steady and my face calm. Paul and Mrs. Ronald stood beside me, smiling, unaware of what was about to happen. "Thank you all for coming," I began. "I know many of you are curious about why we're here today. I'm about to share something important with you." Paul, trying to act supportive, chimed in with a fake smile. "Shirley, darling, we are so proud of you. Whatever this announcement is, we're behind you 99%. His words dripped with insincerity, and I couldn't wait to wipe that smug smile off his face. I took a deep breath. "I've brought you all here to reveal some truths about my marriage and the Ronald family." I paused, noticing the room fall silent, everyone waiting to hear what I would say next. Mrs. Ronald's smile started to falter, and she looked at me, unsure. "Truths? What are you talking about, Shirley?" she asked, her voice shaking a little. "I'm talking about the lies, the abuse, and the illegal activities that have been happening behind the scenes," I said. The tension in the room grew thick. You could feel the shock spreading through the crowd. "Have you lost your mind?" Paul's face turned bright red, his anger barely under control. "No," I said firmly. "In fact, I've never been clearer about what needs to be done." I turned to the large screen behind me and signaled for the video to play. It was a recording of one of the many conversations where Paul and Mrs. Ronald had treated me horribly. The audio echoed through the room, and the guests gasped. People started whispering as the truth came out. Mrs. Ronald's face went pale, and her hands started to shake. She looked terrified. "And this is just the start," I said, holding up a folder filled with documents. "These papers show financial irregularities, including embezzlement and fraud. There's no hiding from this." Paul's voice cracked as he desperately tried to stop me. "You can't do this, Shirley. You're ruining everything." I looked him straight in the eye and said, "I'm not ruining anything. You did this to yourself." The truth was out in the open, and there was no turning back now. I had taken my first step toward reclaiming my life. I stood before the crowd, determined to expose the truth, a truth everyone needed to see. As I spoke, the media personnel began clicking their cameras, capturing every moment of the unfolding drama. The sound of shutters clicking filled the room, but I stayed focused. "Shirley, please, let's talk about this privately," Mrs. Ronald whispered, her voice trembling. Her usual calm and controlled demeanor was completely gone. "No, Mrs. Ronald," I replied firmly. "No more private discussions. The time for hiding is over." I continued sharing the evidence I had gathered. The room filled with gasps, shocked faces, and whispers as I exposed more of what had been hidden for so long. Some guests shook their heads in disbelief, while others leaned in to whisper to those around them. I could feel the energy in the room shifting as the truth started to sink in. Paul and Mrs. Ronald stood still, frozen in place, their carefully crafted images crumbling before everyone's eyes. "This is my story," I said, my voice steady. "A story of surviving abuse and standing up against injustice. I refuse to be a victim any longer." As the event came to a close, the room buzzed with activity. Reporters swarmed me, asking questions, their microphones and cameras in my face. Many of the guests came up to me, offering words of support and admiration for what I had done. I smiled politely, but inside, I felt something much deeper, a sense of relief and strength. As I walked away from the podium, I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. I had done it. I had exposed them, keeping my composure and staying in control the entire time. This was my moment of triumph, a moment where I reclaimed not just my voice but my power. The next big step came in the courtroom. The room felt cold and serious, a place where justice would be served. I sat there, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. My lawyer sat beside me, prepared and ready to fight. Across the room, I saw Paul and Mrs. Ronald. They looked unsettled, far from the confident people they once were. Your Honor, we are here today to present the case against Paul and Mrs. Ronald, my lawyer began, his voice clear and strong. This is not just a divorce case. This is about years of emotional and financial abuse. Paul leaned forward, his face pale. Shirley, you can't win this, he whispered across the room, his voice full of desperation. You're going too far. I turned to him, calm but firm. This isn't about winning, Paul. It's about justice. It's about revealing the truth and showing the world who you really are. The trial moved forward, and my lawyer presented all the evidence I had gathered, the recordings, the financial documents, everything that showed the reality of what I had lived through. Piece by piece, the truth was laid out for everyone to see. The judge listened carefully, taking in every word, while Paul and Mrs. Ronald sat there, looking more and more defeated. Your Honor, as you can see, the evidence is clear and overwhelming, my lawyer said as he wrapped up the presentation. We are seeking not only a divorce, but also appropriate legal action for the wrongs committed by Paul and Mrs. Ronald. Mrs. Ronald tried to defend herself. Your Honor, this is all a misunderstanding, she said, her voice shaky. Shirley is exaggerating. But her words sounded empty, even to herself. The evidence was undeniable. It spoke louder than any excuses she could offer. Exaggerating? I replied, looking directly at her. The evidence speaks for itself. You can't hide from the truth anymore. In that courtroom, I felt the same strength I had felt when I exposed them in front of the crowd. This wasn't just a fight for myself anymore, it was a fight for justice. And I knew, as I sat there, that the truth would finally prevail. I spoke my final words, directed at both Paul and Mrs. Ronald, a firm statement of my stand against them. The judge, after carefully reviewing all the evidence and hearing the testimonies, made her decision. In light of the overwhelming evidence, she said, I grant the divorce and order legal actions against Paul and Mrs. Ronald for their conduct. As the gavel struck, a wave of relief washed over me. I had done it. I had stood up to them and won. After everything I had been through, I finally felt a sense of victory and justice. The long battle was over, and I could now focus on moving forward. With the legal battles behind me, I began a new chapter in my life. It was time to heal and rebuild. I found a small, quiet place in the countryside far away from the chaos and pain of my past. My new home was peaceful, surrounded by nature and calm. It was the perfect place to start fresh. One afternoon, I sat on the porch of my new home, holding a warm cup of tea in my hands. The gentle breeze made the trees sway, and I could hear birds singing in the distance. For the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. There was no more stress, no more manipulation, no more lies. Just me and the quiet beauty of the world around me. This was the new beginning I had been waiting for. A life free from all the hurt and control I had endured. My journey to get here had been hard, filled with pain and struggle. But it had been worth it. I didn't just survive, I thrived. I found my strength, reclaimed my voice, and now I was finally free. As the sun began to set, casting a warm, golden light across the horizon, I knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be. The future ahead of me was unknown, but that didn't scare me. It was mine to shape, filled with hope, healing, and happiness. This was my story of triumph, the story of a woman who refused to be silenced, who stood tall against all odds. This was my closure, my victory. The journey had been tough, but I had come out on the other side, stronger than before. Now, the story of Shirley's journey had reached its end, a story of standing up for myself, exposing the truth, and finding freedom. Do you think Shirley's decision to expose and legally confront her husband and his mother was the best choice? Could there have been another way to handle this difficult situation? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you like this story and want to hear more like it, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. Your support helps us bring more stories to life.